The challenge with this and any Ducati, and the reason I have one and I spent the money on a race system, is having a Ducati without a race exhaust is like being the best fuck in the world and wanking every night. It is pointless. So today we are at the Harley-Davidson and Ducati dealer in South Bristol. I've come on my little Ducati there. Let's go out for a ride on something special maybe. So I ride this road quite a lot on my GS, and whilst I think this bike is a lot more road focused than the GS, I'm interested to see how he feels about a very tight lane covered in a lot of mud, and as we come around this corner into a lot of potholes. Let's see how we get on. Now on this bike I've been on the motorway, I've been on dual carriageway, I've been on very tiny lanes and lanes like this, and it's a bike that's very confusing, and I'll explain why. And I'm on something special today, the Ducati Multistrada V4S Radar. Stands over a little over 20 grand with a couple of bits added on this one, the crash bars and the spots, but probably in the adventure bike world the Multistrada is the prettiest one. But is it the best one? And what would make it the best or not the best? And whilst it's consistently compared to the GS, I don't think it's a competitor to the GS. It's a competitor to the XR, or maybe the KTM. And although this engine puts out a significant amount of brake horsepower, it is 20 pounds-foot of torque down on the GS. And you do notice that powering out of the bends. The challenge with this and any Ducati, and the reason I have one and I spent the money on a race system, is having a Ducati without a race exhaust is like being the best fuck in the world and wanking every night. It is pointless. Now, when I changed the exhaust on my Monster, the bike changed. It could breathe and it ran. And I imagine it would be the same with this. But overall, it's a pretty thing. What I do notice is, whilst it looks like you sit in the bike, it does feel like you sit on it. And it's noteworthy that when I jumped on it, it didn't feel like a new bike. It felt very comfortable and not alien at all. But the thing that I have noticed, particularly on the different types of roads I've been on, it doesn't weigh an awful lot. 220 something kilos. Now, for day-to-day riding, that's what you want, I guess. But for me, at least when I was going on the more off-roady bits, in the loosest possible sense, I want that weight. But because it's lighter and being quite tall, I didn't feel intimidated by the height. And I'll show you the seat height in a second with me getting on it with my Oompa legs. But overall, a pretty bike. I'm just not sure which version you'd get. There's 30 plus versions of this bike, and I think if I was in the market for one, I'd be looking at a Pikes Peak or something like that and throw the kitchen sink at it. But there's very few better looking bikes of this class. Now, let's have a look at the things I like and the things I'm not so sure about. The first thing I really like, and it's quite notable, it's the thing you're touching all the time, the grips. These are the grippiest grips I've ever had on a stock bike, and they make such a difference. The GS grips tend to wear out quite quickly, yet I can't see them wearing out anytime soon. The blind spot indication was very good, very bright. I would be interested to see how bright that was at night time, because it was very bright in the daytime. I like how the power switch sits over the start button. It's kind of a nice little feature. Stop pressing that again, that's very nice. The manual screen moving is also quite convenient, although I did find personally that screen's a little bit too small. We do have phone storage, if we can get into it, which I can't. Well, anyway, there's phone storage in there for a phone from 20 years ago, so that would be fine. Overall, the fit and finish is very nice. The tyres were impressive, I would say. And I think it's a cracking little bike. And it is a little bike, despite the engine size. I wouldn't be, I was previously felt I would be intimidated by that power. And the low down power simply isn't there in the same way that it is in the GSs of the world. But if you're in the market for an XR or a KTM, I think this is where I'd be putting my money. So let's have a look at the dash. There we see the bright lights for the blind spot detection. Lovely graphic. And a very clear display, albeit with an awful lot of options. Range was showing me with a full tank of 200 miles. I have done about 25, so it's showing 176, so that's about right. I will say this bike is barely run in, so maybe after it's its first service, another 300 miles, again, it would be a different bike again. But yeah, not a bad display. So to a little bit of a negative, whilst that's all relatively easy to use, that's a lot of buttons on the switchgear. This side less so, but fussy nonetheless. But as I say, I guess once you've got used to it, it would all make perfect sense. And I'm not going to have this long enough to make sense of it. My only other niggle is the seat. It feels quite soft when you poke it, but sat on it, yeah, it was a hard seat. Not an uncomfortable seat, but let's say a firm ride. And the last thing I think is not the nicest design feature, but let's have a look at it, is that positioning of the number plate light. I don't know why it's up there, maybe it blocks the radar, but that does look like a little bit of an afterthought. So I'm going to head back to the dealership now and sum up my thoughts, but I have a little sum up for while I'm here. This is a cracking bike, a pretty bike, a very capable bike. And the V4S engine is incredibly smooth. The bike's very light. And if you want a Ducati, you want a Ducati, so you're buying a Ducati. But if you're not sure on whether to get a Ducati or not, without spending another 4 or 5 grand making this bike everything it could be, and it would be fucking biblically good if you did, I'm not sure this is the bike you're going to buy. I just wish I could hear it with a proper exhaust. Then it would be a weapon. Let's head back. So I've just got back to the dealership, and I thought I would sum up, because it was an interesting ride back here, the 20 or so miles I did, compared to the 20 miles going out. Now, 20 miles coming back, I was a bit more used to the bike and wringing its neck a little bit. And when you're up in the rev range, the bike is very good. I do miss that low down punch. But it's a cracking bike. I just don't think, least in the configuration I've got it, and as I said, there's 30 odd configurations of this bike, it's not a competitor for the GS. It's a competitor for the XR. And once you start speccing that bike up, perhaps you're into the M package or the competition package XR. I don't know as whether you'd buy one. But I think you buy a Ducati because you want a Ducati. Now my Monster, and the reason I have a Monster as my second bike, as I described it today, it's probably not the best naked bike, but it's beautiful and it sounds amazing. And that's what Ducatis are meant to do. Now this particular Multistrada I've been riding, because it doesn't have a race exhaust on it, the stock exhaust throttles the hell out of that bike. And I would love to ride it with a proper exhaust system, because I bet it will be a different animal. So for me to say it's a good bike or a bad bike today would be at best unfair. But if you're in the market for a rapid, revvy, comfortable mile muncher, not that I should do miles on this because you'd kill the value, the Ducati V4S is definitely something to consider. Now, like I said, the lightness was great on the flicky bits, less so when I was on the scabby roads. I wanted a bit of weight. The height was manageable. It's a solid bike. I'm looking past the camera because I'm looking at it. Interestingly, it's parked next to mine. Let's have a quick look. So there's the one I took out, and there is mine. Now, I don't think it's probably although it's still a very, very pretty bike, I don't think it's necessarily the best colour combination. It's not particularly aggressive, and I think Ducatis look best when they're aggressive. But this is a cracking dealership for Ducati, and they've got some nice stock in here, so definitely worth a visit. And this is where I bought my Monster from. So yeah, have another little walk around. Lovely bike, but not the bike I thought it was. I just spoke to the salesman, Stuart, and I said it wasn't as aggressive as I thought it would be. And he said, oh yeah, that's the RS and the Pikes Peak. So maybe that's one to take out. Something that really wants to tear your face off and show you that it means business. It's an interesting bike. I think Ducati riders are Ducati riders, so you're going to get one. Same with KTM and same with BMW. If you're after this style of bike, you already know what you want. And having ridden the V4S, we have a V2S over here. Did we? Oh no, it's gone. There was a V2S over here. Well, there is a Desert X though, and that is a gorgeous, gorgeous bike. Yeah, the V2S, I think it would be gutless compared to that V4S. And if you want something light, then you'd get that, I suppose. Interesting. Funny enough, I nearly took this one out, but bizarrely, that Panigale V4S is taller than that Multistrada. But no, some beautiful bikes. That I'd love to ride, but I'm a midget, and that's enormous. I'd need a step ladder. Anyway, Ducati Multistrada V4S. One to consider for definite. Cheers.